Millions of pounds and thousands of Scottish jobs. That's what Scotland's First Minister insists is at stake ahead of the most important budget for a generation. Tomorrow, Chancellor Alistair Darling will set out measures to tackle the recession, potentially including billions of pounds of cuts to public spending. If that does happen, Scotland will have to take its share of the burden. Our business correspondent Hayley Miller looks ahead.
Just over a year ago, Alistair Darling held the red budget box aloft for the first time. 1 year on, and the government, like much of Britain, is well and truly in the red. Today, the First Minister warned him not to use spending cuts to reduce his debt.
If you take £500 million, and that's the kind of suggested figure, out of the economy, that's thousands of job losses and deep cuts in health, education and housing, precisely at the time when we should all be contributing to economic recovery.
Steve Bowers owns a removal company. These days, his trucks spend most of their time parked up. Last year, he was running 6. Now, he's down to 2. And half his workforce have gone as well.
Most of our business came from private households. Some it was for other businesses. The problem being that obviously other businesses are going bust. They don't need removal companies because what they're doing is everybody's tightening their belt, nobody's expanding, so you've lost that market, and again nobody's moving house.
The company's storeroom tells its own story.
All of this furniture and white goods is being stored by big retailers because nobody wants to buy it. Some of this stuff was ordered for the January sales and it's still here. The recession caused by the banking crisis and the drop in consumer confidence has accelerated at such a pace that nobody predicted it, not least the Chancellor.
Alistair Darling's sums from last November are now well out of date. Back then, he predicted that economic growth would fall by 1.25% this year. Tomorrow, he'll have to admit a fall closer to 3.5%. As a result, government debt is expected to rise from a prediction of £43 billion in November to around £170 billion.
Wow, that's really pretty.
I know.
You know.
In Peterhead, the Norris family are struggling with rising costs too.
I think we've had to be more careful with our shopping, I think, first and foremost. And we've had to budget really carefully so that we've got money for the kids' birthday presents. We've had to curtail any sort of thoughts of a holiday this year.
But making the government's books balance will be a much bigger task tomorrow. Hayley Miller, reporting Scotland.
Well, let's speak now to our political editor, Brian Taylor in Glasgow. Brian, we heard the UK figures there. They're pretty frightening. How serious is the challenge to Scottish public spending?
It is substantial, Jackie. Let's be clear, though. Scottish spending has doubled in the past decade, but those days are over. Already in the period ahead, Scottish spending is scheduled to be relatively tight. Alex Salmond, as we heard, is already complaining about £500 million of cuts he sees coming down the line next year. If the Chancellor announces further spending constraint tomorrow, then that could be relatively bad news for Scotland. But are these cuts or are they efficiency savings? Think of it this way. If the Scottish Government, off its own bat, manages to save 20 quid by improving its efficiency, then that's 20 quid that's available for frontline services like education in Scotland. If, on the other hand, the Treasury orders the Scottish Government to reduce its spending by £20, then that 20 quid goes back to the Treasury, whether it's presented as efficiency savings or not.
But the Treasury would say we've had the gain, now comes the pain.
No, that's quite right, Jackie. It's exactly the point that they are making today and will make tomorrow. They say that Alex Salmond is in utter denial about the extent of the global crisis afflicting Britain along with other countries. They point to that doubling in expenditure over a decade. They also say that Treasury measures like the cut in VAT, like the multi-billion-pound bailout of the banks, have helped Scotland and helped Scotland hugely. In those circumstances, they say, Scotland has to take her share of the pain.
Brian, thank you. We will, of course, have a full roundup of the effects of the budget reporting Scotland tomorrow night.